Okay, before we turn to the agenda, Emma's got an announcement in relation to the accommodation review. So Emma's going to announce that.
Thank you, Chairman. Eagle-eyed amongst you will note that that was a to follow report. The intention was always that was to be a follow report for Cabinet. On Friday, we had a joint SEAC and joint customer trading meeting over in South Norfolk to discuss the report, where the report had got to. Very well attended by members, so thank you to all those that did attend. And through both committees, lots of questions and actions asked of officers. Officers have reflected on this with the Managing Director and the leaders and will be doing further work as requested by both of those committees. So the report, therefore, for Cabinet next week is pulled and will not be going next week on the agenda. Therefore, there is no report for ONS to consider today. The next steps will be for officers to link in with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Joint Member Working Group, the Chair of SEAC and the Chair of Customer Trading to make sure that we've fully got all the asks from those committees and we can do the further work as requested. So just to confirm, no report to be reviewed on that item today as it has been pulled from the Cabinet agenda.
I think it would have been helpful to us if we'd known that earlier, because it actually says to follow right up until now. So I don't know when that decision was made. I'm guessing that report, I think we was all expecting to be basically the report that went in front of SEAC, perhaps updated somewhat. But I'm interested to know when the report was actually.
So do you want me to confirm that, Chair? So the idea always was that the SEAC report for Broadland would be updated and would be coming through to Cabinet. The decision was made this morning. So that this meeting was held this morning. So I'm hot off the press with that update for you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chairman, may I ask what time the decision was made, please?
Well, the meeting was held between 9 and 10 o'clock this morning, Councillor Gurney.
Councillor Adams.
Yeah, yes, I note what the monitoring officer is saying, but I still think it would be useful to members, at least, to know exactly what was agreed at the SEAC meeting on Friday, the recommendations which has caused this to be paused, shall we say, for the time being, because I think a lot of members will be unaware of the decisions taken at SEAC on Friday and the reasons why it is felt that at this time that the report has been pulled. So if somebody somewhere can give us a briefing on exactly what the recommendations were on Friday, I believe there is probably a little bit of information from South Norfolk as to their decisions as well, but that I'm not absolutely certain of. But we're only concerned with ourselves as a sovereign council at this time as to what decisions were taken at SEAC or the recommendations from SEAC on Friday.
Thank you, Debbie. I mean, Emma.
Emma, last time I looked, Chair. Yeah, so absolutely, Councillor Adams, that's the conversation that officers want to have with the Chair of SEAC and Chair of those other groups, as I've highlighted, and absolutely there will be information coming out to all members. That will be through the minutes of SEAC, which you always receive, but there will also be a briefing and an update to all members as to where we find ourselves now and what the next steps are. So rest assured that absolutely will be happening, Councillor Adams.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. But still, nonetheless, Chairman, I still feel that I think there were 3 recommendations, as I recollect, from SEAC on Friday, because I was there. And I still feel that it would be helpful to this committee at this time to at least hear what those 3 recommendations were. I think I know what they were, but it would be a bit of a guesswork from myself. So can somebody, an officer somewhere, enlighten me as to what the 3 recommendations were from SEAC? Thank you.
Chair, do you want me to respond?
Yes.
Yeah. I wasn't in SEAC, so I can't. I was in the other committee because it can only be in one place at one time, Councillor Adams. Sorry. Yeah, well, sadly, I can't dupe my cake myself yet, Councillor Adams, but if you can help me with that, I'm sure that would be useful. We can, I believe, Councillor Justine Thomas sent an email around to all members of Overview and Scrutiny this morning, providing as chair of SEAC her view of that meeting. So you all do already have that in your inbox.
She only sent it, Chairman, to members of Overview and Scrutiny. Those that were not initially on Overview and Scrutiny, and certainly those sitting in the members sitting at the back there, have not seen that letter from, or that email from Justine.
Which I can absolutely look. The chairman of SEAC decided to send it to whom she sent it to.
I can help, Tony. Basically, SEAC agreed to the working group's recommendations, recommendation 1, 2, and 3. They further amended that, and Justine's email sent, I believe, late last night. I've just clocked it on the way in, actually. Also makes reference to the points that was in 3, which also I've got imprinted in here because there are very, very few points. So what the recommendation was, which also complies, ties up with the working group, is that to recommend a Commercial, Trading and Customer Focus Committee, the Service Improvement Efficiency Committee, and both Broadland and South Norfolk Council cabinets that 1, the council does not proceed with the purchase of a Horizon building on Broadland Business Park option 9 at this stage due to further information being required relating to, and there's a series of bullet points, project costs of future replacement of solar panels, their circulation system, the gas boilers, refit costs, including purchase and fit out costs, the need for a detailed survey of the building to include structure, mechanical and engineering and future use of the building. 2, the option to occupy Thorpe Lodge. Option 2, to be investigated further, looking at the potential renovation of the building to make it carbon neutral and to address the car parking issues. 3, the future office project joint working group considered the above option further once further information has been obtained. And then the SEAC committee further strengthened that, if you like, by saying that it should not go ahead even in principle to purchase Horizon, and that then the working group should continue and then come back with further recommendations to go through SEAC, ONS and Cabinet in that manner. And that's what's in her report, in her letter. So I think that covers it. And it's because, you see, I've got the working group one here, so I could just go to it.
Thank you for that, Chairman. That is very helpful.
Okay. So I guess we should now move on with the agenda. Phil, are you okay? Are you?
I'm very well. No, it was only if there was any other questions around the SEAC meeting, but I think you've covered it accurately.
Oh, thank you very much, Phil. Do I get a gold star for that, Phil?
Well, we'll see how the rest of the meeting goes.
Well, okay, all right. I'll give you that. Okie dokie. Sue, just before we, yeah.
Thank you. On the same topic, I'm a bit concerned. Will there be any opposition councillors on the proposed working group going forward to look at the options? I didn't hear. I heard SEAC.
So the joint, as I've explained, the officers are reflecting on the meeting on Friday, and they will meet with both chairs of SEAC and CTCF, but also with the chair and the vice chair of the joint member working group, and the vice chair is Councillor Riley. That's just to discuss where we're at and therefore what the next steps are. So there absolutely will be opposition representation as part of that discussion.
Right, okie dokie. Ken?
Chairman, I was at the meeting on Friday, but I didn't get a copy of that letter. Could you forward that on to me? The letter you just read?
From the chair of SEAC?
Yes.
Yes, she sent it out late last night, so it should be in your inbox.
No,
if it's not.
I've just looked.
Oh, yeah, Tony just covered that. It didn't go to other councillors, only ONS members. So I think there's some confusion on a data list as to who that is.
Yes, because I'm not a member of the committee, you know, not SEIC or whatever.
Oh, I see.
But I was attending. But I'd like a copy, Chairman.
Get it?
Oh, you do?
Chairman, I'll
Before-
check with Justine, and I'm sure she'd be happy for me to forward it to all members. I'm sure that wouldn't be a problem.
Okey-dokey. Okay. Right, so we'll turn to the agenda now. To receive declaration of interest, item number 1, procedural rule number 8. Grant?
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda item 16, proposal for a second building at the Food Enterprise Park. I have a disclosable pecuniary interest in that item as I am the accountant for the company that is named in that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. So I know later on we've got exempt matters. There's 2 of them. I think that matter is number 2. I think, bearing in mind that Grant would probably want to leave, could we swap those around?
We could, at Chair's discretion, you can have the agenda however you wish. So item 16, we can swap with 17. So Councillor Nerden can be here for Bure Valley Railway, and then as it's a disclosable pecuniary interest, he will need to leave and he can go home early.
Okay, great. And if James, can you remind me when I get there? Because unfortunately last night I was up with my son all night. I haven't slept since Sunday night. Just remind me when we get there. Thanks. So item 2, apologies for absence and substitutes.
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from Councillor Kelly, and his substitute is Councillor Hempsall. And we also have Councillor Adams, who's a substitute member.
Nice to see you both again, previous members of ONS. Oh, right. 2013, the first time, Lana. Yeah.
Good old days.
I think me, you and Nigel are the only committee members left from that time period, actually. Okie dokie, so we've covered that. Minutes of overview and scrutiny meeting, 12th of October. First of all, are they a correct record? All those agree? Agree, okay. Many matters arising. I've got one. And it's by way of we did say that from the cabinet meetings, we'll try to give an update on any amendments that we had. So I do that under the minute. Independent living assistant policy, and page 9 on the minutes, second from last paragraph, where we raised this issue. And it was about the cap, if you remember, that there was a cap going to be removed from Broadland. There was a split vote on that. Cabinet was informed, Peter, of that, because you asked me to make sure they was informed of that, and they was. Yes, there was a split vote on that. I had the casting vote, and what the issue was that if the cap is removed, that as you move forward on that, that could it be possible, and we asked the officers to clarify this, is it possible that it may mean that that may dip into some grant funding, etc. We then took that forward to Cabinet, and what we asked Cabinet was that Cabinet amend the policy to ensure that the removal of the 1,500 cap on the care repair service did not result in less funding being made available for adaptations than before the cap was removed. I also spoke to the portfolio holder just after the meeting, just happened to bash into him about it. And if you recall, there was a further paper that came through about 2 days later, giving further to that. And that was as a result of this. I have to say, I had a very happy cabinet meeting on this. The cabinet thanked ONS for bringing it to their attention, and would ensure that indeed that was the case. And I thank the chair very much for, thanking ONS, even though it was a split decision, for its recommendation. So happy days. So that's it. Any other matters arising? Other matters arising? No, Chairman's announcements. None. Public speaking, James?
There's no public speaking, Chairman.
Okay, 6A, supplementary agenda item, scrutiny of budget. Questions, page 15. So these are the questions that we arrived at in our pre-budget workshop, and it then comes back to ONS to ensure that we're happy with these. Do you want any others to go in, etc. So any comments? Peter?
A matter of accuracy, Mr. Chairman, there should be a D in balanced.
Right.
I don't recall asking whether the Cabinet thought that would be feasible for 22, 23. I seem to recall just asking the question that I wanted it to be balanced with no increase and no draw on reserves. The second sentence, I don't recall saying. Maybe I did, but I don't recall it.
Which question was that?
6. The aspiration should be set. I'm sorry. The aspiration should be to set a balanced budget, budget with no need to draw on reserves and no need to increase council tax. I remember you saying that, actually. Does Cabinet believe in this will be feasible for 2020? Yeah, I think.
I don't remember the second sentence, but maybe James can correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I seem to recollect that, actually.
Do you?
I would agree with James.
I
in this
sit corrected
case.
then. I'm not going to argue about it.
See?
On that same question, I wonder whether we could strengthen it a little by us including whilst re-establishing or improving service levels. Because it's...
Yeah.
We're reporting on what actually was discussed at the meeting. It's not now an opportunity to amend what was discussed.
No, but what we can do here, not amend necessarily what
You can
your
add to
point
it,
was,
okay.
but you can add another question if you like, So I don't know if you want to just think about it for a moment. You might want to rephrase that as another question.
I just thought that was the appropriate place to put it, seeing as if we balance the budget, we need to make sure it doesn't impact on service levels.
Okay. Yeah, would you agree with that being another question? Yeah. Okay. Just let James get that down, yeah. Not in writing mood today, James. Yeah, yes, far away, Lana.
There we go. Right, so my question is, and I don't know who the author of this question is question 8, where the question is around skills in Norfolk. I don't know who the author is, but is there a reason why this question isn't Broadland specific? And secondly, I wonder, and I know this is something that probably wasn't on the radar when these questions were formulated, tying this in with today's report with the householder support that we're offering, because the two inexorably go together, isn't it? It's upskilling and getting people back into paid employment versus support that they receive. So I just wondered, whoever the author was, is whether it would be appropriate to expand on that question in that way.
Who came up with that, or was it just around the table we kind of concluded that? I can't remember now. No.
Page 15.
So basically what's being asked here is this has affected the one team's ability to recruit, and you're saying, Lana?
No, the question says that is there a skills shortage in Norfolk generally? My question is, why isn't this a Broadland specific question, as this is Broadland District Council, and clearly this affects us and ratepayers in this district and businesses in this district. So that's why I'm asking why this question isn't Broadland specific. And secondly, is there a case to tie this in, as in the skill shortage, with the agenda item that's following on this agenda in terms of the householder support scheme? Because if there is a clear shortage of skilled labour, then perhaps the support scheme ought to, in some way, shape or form, be supporting people into the jobs that actually are available and are, they look to be well paid within the district and in, and Norfolk generally.
if that's where we want to go. It's just a question. I mean, I'm sure that when these questions were formed, there was no notice of this agenda item on, for overview and scrutiny.
Yeah, I think whatever items on the agenda in terms of that paper, we've still got the budget question going through to cabinet. So do you want to make that a C somehow? A, B, C, that question?
I don't mind. I'm substituting, Chairman. I'm just putting it to the committee generally. It's just something that's obviously jumped out at me, coming fresh to the agenda and what you guys are doing. I mean, it's a brilliant question. I just wonder if it could be made more specific and tie in with some other funding that we've been allocated from government to spend here. That's all. Okay. So yeah, if you want to add it as a C, it's obviously up to the committee to accept that or not.
Okay. Debbie, is this connected? Because you'd put your hand up.
Mine was connected with the previous discussion, really, Chair, around the fact we have to deliver a balanced budget. It's not, by law, we have to deliver a balanced budget. And I just wanted to make that very clear, really.
Yeah, but 6 is clearly saying the aspiration should be to set a balanced budget with no need. That's the cursor to it. I mean, we all know you have to set a balanced budget. So that's the cursor to the rest of the sentence. So anyway, just getting back now to anything you want to add in relation to Lana's point about the other paper, Debbie, or? Oh, Emma.
If I can assist, Chair, I mean, I think Lana, she says Councillor Hempsell's looked at this with a fresh set of eyes. You got one of two options. You could add it as a C to this, or you could raise it as a question on the back of the paper that you're receiving later today. You have those two options to you.
Okay, so do we want to reserve that? Because I was beginning to think, do we want to reserve that as a C, depending on that debate goes today, and then we could add it in at the end of the meeting, if it makes sense at that point? Yeah, great. We'll agree with that. Do we agree? Great, wonderful. We'll move on. Sue?
I just had possibly one addition to question 12, because it seems to me anyway that wages are set to rise, and has enough been built in to the 22-23 budget to accommodate this pressure? And then in view of this, has the Cabinet considered further outsourcing of services? So I wondered whether we need to link that to that there is likely to be pressure on wages, and wonder whether the Cabinet need to consider whether they've included enough flex for that pressure in this budget.
I mean, projected wage rises. There is a projection going forward, isn't there? Is it 2%?
So there's two things going on at the moment, Chairman. There is a projection in next year's budget of 2%. We're also in the midst of local negotiations with staff, because we're not part of the national pay settlement. We are local, so we're in the midst of those discussions at the moment.
Yeah, so it's a bit difficult when there's already forward provisions. So the provision at the moment is 2%. So the negotiations with the staff are quite key in that. So we're not, like a contractor trying to, we've got to put in some cash and we're going to have to pay some more money. But we're not in that ball game. So suggest not. Could I just ask one question before we move on? Did anybody go to the Broadland event budget workshop? Did you go, Sue? Anybody else? Grant? Is there anything from there that we should be asking connected through to Cabinet? No? Okay. Okay. Fine. Are we happy then with this, and we'll come back to a possible C later, yeah? Okay, agreed?
And
Yes.
amending.
Yeah,
6.
and amended 6, yeah. All agreed? We have a consensus, thank you. Right, item 7, Cabinet reports. First item is on page 24. Treasury Management Quarter Second Report 2020, 2022. Lead Officer Darren Slother. capital and treasury accounts. Fire away, please, and welcome, Darren.
Thank you, Chair. This is just a brief factual summary report that gives an overview of the Council's Treasury position at the end of September, Q2. The interest that we've earned from fixed term investments is relatively low, but that reflects the current position with interest rates. Our Treasury advisors Link do, however, advise that interest rates will be rising, and they predict a rise of possibly up to 0.25% by June 22. The income that we've received from our investments is principally derived from a diversified income fund that we invest a proportion of our cash into, which is administered by an external provider. We've had no borrowing to date and don't expect any borrowing by the end of the financial year. We're required to report against our prudential indicators that we set in the Council's Treasury strategy, and there have been no breaches of those indicators to date this year. And the report also includes a summarised economic activity update, summarised from our Treasury advisors Link. Any questions?
Okay, open it up. Sue?
I have just one question. Are our investments both ethical and green?
A proportion of them are, and we are trying, as we invest, as we reinvest, we're investing more of our cash that comes back into green investments. So we're investing with Lloyds Bank, have a sustainable account that we're investing some of our cash as it comes back into. So they particularly direct their investments to green and sustainable funds. The Diversified Income Fund is also investing in green options as well. And the Standard Chartered Bank have also got a particular sustainable and ethical fund that we've started to channel investments in. So we are heading more of our investments that way. We have to balance it with the returns. The returns are often not as good, but I think we've discussed before at Cabinet and other meetings that that's the direction that we potentially want to steer our investments. So we are heading that way. Yeah. Thank you.
Lana?
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Catchpole's actually onto something. I think this council could probably do well with getting a policy together on ethical commissioning and ethical procurement. You know, it's becoming more and more obvious that we are under increasing scrutiny as a public body in terms of where we put public money, and people are increasingly sensitive about, you know, how we do our business. So I don't think it would be amiss to put a policy like that on the table. Chairman, suggestion.
Yes, I can say.
Okay, I've just, we have portfolio holder here for environmental. It's very good. Julie always attends our meetings. So I just wondered if Julie wants to make a comment.
I'm not sure if Councillor Hemsworth was saying ethical or green.
Covers a whole gamut of things, doesn't it? Because this leads on from Sue Catchpole's, which was talking about green specifics. You're talking about a whole range of ethical. Yeah.
Ethical
So
or green?
the green part.
Green,
The green.
right. Well, I will make sure that you've got a full answer for that in the report that's coming to your meeting about the environmental strategy in about a fortnight's time.
Yeah.
I think what I was picking up is Councillor Catchpole's kind of alluded to. It's not just green; it's ethical in general. You know, we need to be putting our investments into funds that are not exploitative, that are that actually meet a high standard of criteria, ethical criteria that our residents would expect of us when investing money. I do understand that we've been shying away from that. However, moving forward, I don't think that would be the wrong thing to do is putting a policy on the table for this council to approve around, ethical and green commissioning. Thank you.
Tasha.
Thanks, Chair.
I'll let you in, Debbie, in a minute.
I remember this coming up during lockdown, and we talked about it before, and the question came up about the countries that we invest in, and some of them had regimes where there are quite severe human rights abuses. And we talked about it at the time, and we were just told, well, anyone can point out, we shouldn't be investing in this country because of this regime, and that Cabinet had the power to just, not invest there. There didn't need to be a policy, but I do think it needs firming up, as Lana has just said. I don't think it's enough to just say, oh, these are on the list, but we can choose not to invest there if we don't want to. I think we should have things firmed up where it's simply not on the list because they are human rights abusers and all the rest of it. I just don't think it should be on the table to be considered. I think there should be a more robust policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I see you, Caroline? Or? No. Okay, Debbie.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Just to say, we set the Treasury management strategy every year, and that details and outlines where we will be putting investments. So that will obviously be coming back into full council, as we do annually, as part of the budget setting process. So members will be seeing that Treasury management strategy, and that outlines where we place any investments, and obviously we've had previous discussions around ethical and green because they are different, but also we balance risk and return, and also our duty to get best value too, and so we spread our risks around who we invest with. But just to let you know that members will have that opportunity to review the strategy when it comes forward in February.
Dave?
Thank you very much. Just a question that's just come to me on this subject is, what is the weighting to return over ethics? Because where we are now, ethics is very high up the agenda. And when we're looking at inflation running the way it is, are we actually going to get a return on investment that's going to come anywhere close to what inflation looks like? And if it's going to be impossible, why don't we take a lower return on investment to make sure we have much higher ethical credentials than the councils around us? So where's the line?
Debbie?
That's for members to decide, obviously bearing in mind that, you have to deliver a balanced budget as well. So, you have to take into account risk, reward, and balancing your budget and everything, but that's absolutely for members to make that decision.
Well, that would seem to lead us back to...
Yeah, just for, because there's a funnel now. Dave.
So just as a quick follow-up, where's that line right now?
In our current Treasury management strategy, it's mentioned in there that we will invest in some ethical, but it's not an absolute. So there is a list of people that we invest with, and that's where we place our investments, and obviously make sure that we spread that risk around and among a number of institutions.
And I recall this is what Natasha was referring to when we had that list of that full council meeting. I do recall it. Sue?
I was just going to say this basically leads us back to Lana's suggestion, Councillor Hempsell's suggestion, that we need to formulate a policy around this, because I completely agree.
Okay, so just moving forward, Debbie, you're saying that we've got the green aspect, which very kindly Judy said will be coming back in a paper in 4 months' time, Judy?
No, you're getting a paper, I think, in a
fortnight's time. And then Debbie is saying, when did you say, Debbie, you'd be February?
It will be February as part of the budget setting,
Right,
Chair.
budget.
We just bring the Treasury management strategy there.
Same as last year. So we've got, when we come to the recommendations here, I don't know if anybody wants to carry on debate around any other item, but on the recommendations, you've got 1 and 2, which are really to endorse and note. But we could have another if the committee agreed. I'm just going on, summing up on what's coming across at the moment anyway. is that we could have a line in there to the effect that could the cabinet, could the council look at further development of this of the ethical policy moving forward to the budget setting for February to ensure an ethical pathway. Yeah.
Chairman, can I just come back? So perhaps the recommendation could read all the above, and the council adopts a ethical, green and social, ethical commissioning policy for Treasury management.
Yeah, that's the same thing we're just using.
Yeah, but it's not not considered to, but that the council does. That's all I'm saying. That's a recommendation from Overview and Scrutiny.
Yeah, and it is. But we have to say that we have to ask the cabinet because it goes to cabinet first, then to full council. So we have to ask. So we're not a decision maker.
I know.
So we actually do have to ask.
Not quite.
Could we agree on that, or do you want James to read this back? Yeah.
Well, I've got that the council adopts an ethical, I didn't catch the end of it. Green. Ethical, green.
So you're asking me?
Yes.
I'm hearing mutterings from the ladies there.
I've got that
the council adopts an ethical commissioning policy, to incorporate, green and social aspects, so that's all.
Green and ethical.
Well,
ethical
Treasury
commissioning policy to encapsulate.
And it doesn't just have to be Treasury, it could be commissioning full stop across the board, where, what we commission, because this is all public taxpayers' money, isn't it? So, it could just be developing an overarching policy that also includes Treasury management. It's just because it's quite obvious, because we all understand that, money management and fund management and pension fund management can sometimes stray into territories that some of us might not particularly approve of. So I think an overarching policy would actually really support the work of this council.
So could we just be specific? Because I do actually have to just keep drawing this back to what we've got in front of us as well. I'm not disagreeing with you, by the way. I think we need that overarching. However, let's just come back to what we've got in front of us, which is Treasury Management Quarter Report. So it's that specific that we are talking about at the moment. In terms of the other that you're talking about, the general overarching requires a motion to council, maybe. It requires that kind of a policy attempt or somehow it comes back through some other mechanism. But right now we're talking about investment by Treasury management. So it's that aspect that we've really got to retain this to. Yes? Okay. Right. So.
Number 3 would be that the council adopts an ethical commissioning policy to encapsulate green and social projects. Is that correct? Or?
Ethical green. Ethical green and social projects.
Right. So before we move. Oh, sorry, read that out first.
That the council adopts a commissioning policy to encapsulate ethical, green and social projects. Well, do you want that to be Treasury management?
Yes.
That would make more sense, Jim.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter?
I'm not content with the wording as it stands, Chairman. I would like to insert the word consider.
Yeah. Okay.
Consider adopting.
Yeah. So
sorry, but consider it makes it more woolly, doesn't it? If you use the word consider, makes it more woolly.
So look,
we should
we've got at the moment we've got a move and a seconder as I'm taking it. Yeah, who moved and seconded it? It was Lana and Sue. So So I think the only way through this now, Peter, is to do that, unless, you know, you want to put an amendment, we put the amendment first and then we do that. In terms of order. Do you want to put amendment or should we just go straight to the... Okay. Right, okay. All those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Any against? Abstentions? 1, 2.
So that's carried, Chairman.
Okie dokie. And should we move straight on to the other the recommendations that are here now? Do you want to ask any further questions? No? Move straight to recommendations? Okay. So along with, so we'd add that as a recommendation along with 1 and 2 Dorset Treasury activities for the first half of the year and that complies with the agreed strategy. 2, note that 2021-22 prudential indicators for the first 6 months of the year. Moved? Yes, moved. Yeah. Okay. All those agree? Yes. Any against? No. No abstentions. Right. Okay. Thank you very much. And well, I think you sort of come back again. Right, so moving on to what we're moving on to. Household Support Fund. Agenda item 10, page 31. You're welcome, Ken. And Mike Pursehouse, but you're doing it, James instead, I guess.
I am, Chairman, if that's okay. Good morning
Yes.
to you. Good morning to all of you councillors.
I suppose so, Jamie.
I suppose so. I'll do my best, Chair, I promise. So just a brief overview. The Household Support Fund is a government initiative made available to local authorities during October and passed down to upper tier and unitary authorities by way of delegation. Norfolk has received 6.6 million of funding. That funding is placed with us in the context of increasing costs, as we know, fuel, general inflationary pressures upon household resources, and also the reduction of universal credit by £20 post-COVID, which was increased temporarily at the start of the COVID pandemic. The money is actually relatively open in terms of its applicability, which is good to see, not always the case in pots of money that are made available from government at short notice. It is, the report details what it can be used for. It cannot be used for mortgage payments or debt advice, and there's a clear mandate from government that 50% of the money needs to be used for families, households with families, and 50% not. Given the money sits with Norfolk County Council, the report is kind of intentionally written to be quite vague, and that's because Norfolk County Council was still going through the process of deciding themselves how best to allocate the money to Norfolk residents. At the point we wrote the report, we hadn't got clarity. So my apologies, but I hope you understand why the report is kind of vaguely written. It was always our understanding, and I can confirm this morning, that we'd receive a sum as a district authority of in excess of £100,000. In fact, this morning, Norfolk County Council have confirmed that will be £128,000 to Broadland. And clearly, given the size of the amount, officers need delegated authority to spend that amount of money. Hence why we've, at the last minute, put a cabinet report forward to come through ONS and cabinet next week. The report details, and you'll see, our intention is to use that money wisely and proactively to the best of our ability. We'll hold a little bit of money back to be reactive. So when people contact us, and they have already started because the word is out in terms of the Household Support Fund and its availability. So we'll meet need by people who effectively self-refer, but our intention is to be proactive. And that's for two reasons. One is we want to address the underlying issue this fund is available for, which is over the winter period, households falling into real and significant hardship. Getting to those people as quickly as possible is clearly the moral interest here, but also because the government have mandated the money must be spent by March. And actually spending £6.6 million by March is quite a tall order. So we're very keen to be on the front foot. So the report will, you'll see the report details. Our proactive stance will be to use our data sets to look at where we're aware of existing hardship in families, number of data sets we have to that effect, including benefits, our housing teams, council tax support system, etc. To work with schools who will have a good awareness of families and children who are clearly experiencing degrees of hardship, and then to use our Warm Homes Fund and team to look at areas where we know there is fuel poverty. So again, we can be on the front foot in terms of targeting people directly. I think I'll pause there, Chairman, only to say that the recommendation or the ask is to delegate authority down to Mike in conjunction with the portfolio holder to determine the actual spend of money, but we've given an indicative allocation in terms of how we'd like to proceed for your reassurance. Chair, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jamie. Opening up, so Lana and then Natasha and then Sue.
Thank you, Chairman. There doesn't seem to be an awful lot of detail on what this money can or cannot be spent on. What I'm going to loop back to is the suggestion that I made around budget question 8. There is an apparent skill shortage nationwide and locally. At a recent jobs fair that was held by our Member of Parliament, Jerome Mayhew, it was obvious that the disparity between the number of jobs that are available and the people who are actually looking for them or seeking employment is immense. And it's not boding well for the people who are advertising jobs because there are simply not enough people looking for them. So what I wanted to loop back to is, are there any plans to use some of this money to address this skill shortage? Because there are clearly jobs generate money, they generate income for families, in order that they can pay their bills, etc., etc. In Acol, at the start of the pandemic, the parish council started up a food bank. 18 months or longer later, there are still 11 families, the same 11 families that are still being supported by this food bank. Clearly in that space of time, they could have been reskilled, redirected, picked up in some way, shape or form. However, they still rely on regular donations of food. Again, is this household support fund going to be used to put these people in a better place so they can actually support themselves? Because there's clearly no shortage of work, but there is a skills gap that really needs addressing and needs addressing soon, because the longer these families have to rely on this support, that the bigger the knock-on effect is not just on them, but on the children and generations to come. So how much of this money is going to be put to that particular use, at least for working age families?
Chairman, are you happy for me to answer?
Absolutely.
Councillor Hemphill makes an excellent point. The funding criteria for this fund is detailed in paragraph 3.4. It is about handouts, effectively, and that's what the government have mandated the money for. So the use of the money is for things such as food, energy and water, essentials linked to energy and water, wider essentials, and there's some detail in there. My understanding is we're not allowed to use this pot of money for skills. However, Scrutiny will be minded of the COVID recovery report, which came forward in the summer, I'm thinking June time, which detailed a significant allocation of funding towards our skills agenda across the one team, looking at developing, augmenting, making more impactful some of our existing schemes we have in place, such as Choices, Work for All, the government's Kickstart scheme, to which we're leading the way in terms of the number of people we've recruited and assisted small and medium enterprises to recruit. So there's an active programme of work around skills. It is an excellent point, Councillor Hemphill. It's just that this funding is not, I don't believe we're unable to use the money for that purpose.
Yes, ma'am.
If this is a handout, then actually handing out money to the local college to train a number of people in plastering, in whatever the current equivalent is of NVQ level 3s, which is for childcare and support of, that course doesn't take an awful long time. It takes 3 months, I think, from start to finish. That is also a handout, Jamie, and yet it would put a lot of, driving tests, you know, for HGV drivers, etc. You know, that's also a handout. So I suppose it depends on what you classify as a handout that will actually bring somebody genuine benefit at the end of it.
Jamie, I think if you could just answer that, and then I'm going to move on.
I can't answer in any different way. I do not disagree for 1 second, but the money is limited in its use, and we have to follow that limitation, I'm afraid.
Yep. Okay, Natasha.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I note Councillor Hempsell's comments, upskilling and all the rest of it is very important for the medium and long term. But my understanding is this is about the immediate need of people who are going to be pushed over the edge into absolute terrible situations of poverty, choosing whether to heat the house or eat. And this is about an immediate need. I don't like the term handout because it's often not people's fault that they are in a position where they are needing to rely on charity or goodwill and all the rest of it. But this is about an immediate need. And I don't like the attitude that the response is people need to try harder, do better, because sometimes they have people who found themselves in really difficult situations, and telling someone, get a job, work a bit harder. Yes, it makes sense in the long term. If you're suddenly a single parent, if your heating has suddenly gone up, getting a job, waiting 6 weeks for your first pay packet isn't going to help you when you've got to heat your home. So I think it's really important that we have the right attitude to this, and I fully support the scheme. I wish people had more money in their pockets so it didn't have to go through councils. People didn't feel that they're going begging to receive money, because there is a lack of dignity in that. So I'm glad you're being proactive about it. And I see here this is going on the sort of topping up fuel and things like that. Will that be coming through as cash or vouchers that they can scan at local convenience stores, or preloaded cards and things like that?
My understanding is it will vary depending on the scheme. I think with fuel, we'll be looking to place money directly with the provider of oil, for example, so they can deliver directly to the household. I would imagine it will be different when it comes to things like food, and we may look at vouchers. Forgive my lack of clarity, because I suppose the answer depends on the scheme, and if Mike were here, he might be able to give you a better answer. But we'll look to do the most simple thing by way of our residents.
Just to come back again, thank you. Does this replace the previous government warm home scheme that comes directly from like British Gas and things like that, or is that in addition? Will people be able to get it twice?
I don't believe this replaces anything. It's just an addition.
It's addition, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Definitely addition, yeah. Sue?
Yeah, my question was, I think you said the sum coming to Broadland was 128,000, and I noticed that Norfolk County Council are getting something like 6.7 million, it says here. So I just sort of wonder if those proportions are generous or not, and whether other district councils are receiving similar.
It's possibly more of a political matter about whether the allocations are correct or not. So I'll leave that one with you guys to judge rather than comment. But the allocations to district councils are weighted by need, which I think is probably the right thing to do. So I believe NCC looked at universal credit uptake as the denominator in terms of how they allocate. So I've got in front of me a list, and apologies again, I couldn't push this forward in advance of the meeting. It's only come ready to me this morning. So the range of allocations to districts is from 301,000 to just over 100,000, depending on the need determined by universal credit uptake. So you can see kind of the logic there. The rest of the money is being allocated. Again, NCC are looking to be as proactive as possible. So they are putting a degree of money behind their Norfolk Assistance Scheme, which would be their help hub, if you like, in this instance, where they could take calls and allocate funding for people who are clearly in need. The rest of the money is going either via the voluntary sector in a proactive manner, or they're looking to deploy through their kind of free school meals route directly to families.
So,
just supplementary to that then, if people receive something from us as part of this scheme, is there anything to preclude them, or has this not been thought about, whether they could actually be receiving something from Norfolk County Council as part of their Help Hub scheme?
That, councillor, is an excellent question and has preoccupied quite a lot of officer time. We have, you'll remember from COVID, we set up in haste a system called the Norfolk Vulnerability Hub, which was allowing us, in that instance, it was used predominantly for the fact that we had a growing number of clinically extremely vulnerable people for whom all councils were doing their best to support, and we needed a system to enable us to monitor what support will be in place, given that there are multiple points of contact in the public sector. We'll be using the same system to make sure that, to the best of our ability, we are only giving the resources to families and individuals as is necessary, clearly with any kind of benefit. And the words in my ear of not using the phrase handout, my apologies for that, because I do understand the negative connotation. But to the best of our ability, we will try to monitor to not allow people to take advantage of the system, because there will always be a very small minority of people who will seek to do that. There will be an expectation of some of that happening. I think that's with the speed, the haste needed to get the amount of money out the door before March, as is mandated by government. We have no option but to accept a little bit of tolerance towards that. But I think the Norfolk Vulnerability Hub will be an excellent tool in helping us to make sure the right people are getting the right support.
Okie dokie. Sue, and then Natasha.
Yeah, just finally then, thank you for that. But I was less concerned about people getting too much and more concerned that people might not be getting enough, because if they're getting it from us, they might not be able to get it elsewhere. So it's slightly the other way round, but thank you for the answer.
Right, thanks. Sue?
On a similar vein, really, does any money that's provided to family from this fund affect their universal credit claim? And my other question would be, how can we as councillors, and what can we say really to our residents to let them know what's available?
The answer to the first question is no, it doesn't have an effect. The second point, what I will do is ask Mike to ask one of his teams to prepare a short briefing to be put out to members so that you're equipped with the right information to promote in the best way that you see fit, either by parish council meetings or, surgeries if you hold them with residents.
And that's really helpful. I think there's been a few ONS meetings now we're asking for these briefings, and they turn out to be really helpful to us as councillors. So that'd be really good. So I've now got Natasha, then Dave, and then Lana.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that universal credit uptake is an indicator of deciding where the funding is going and how much. Broadland has lower uptake of universal credit because we were slower to roll it out compared to Norwich City Council and other councils. So we will have fewer people in receipt of it. They will be on legacy benefits. So they will still be in the same financial situation, but because their claim was made before a certain date, they'll be on job seekers allowance. So there seems to be a little bit of a postcode lottery element here, and it's perhaps not as fair as it could be. I know there isn't a perfect system, but there will be people who are on even lower incomes perhaps than someone on universal credit, but it's a legacy benefit, so it may skew your statistics perhaps.
Yeah, definitely, because it's a question. I actually want a similar point. Actually, go ahead, Joe.
It's an excellent point, and a point I'll need to take away and clarify. Maybe that we're using universal credit as shorthand for benefits recipients. Let me go and check that, because you do make a really valid point. However, I suppose part of the mitigation to that is that the money being given to Broadland District Council is not the only money that Broadland residents have access to. And there's nothing stopping us making referrals to the Norfolk Assistance Scheme, for example. So we will, and we always do our best to find support for anybody who is in need, whether that's our own resource or somebody else's. We will not leave people hanging.
So I'm just thinking, so the intention is that, because there are people stuck around this legacy benefit because this time lag. It's happened across different districts as they rolled out. I know Great Yarmouth's got particular issues there, but the intention, Jamie, is that would not necessarily exclude people that are on legacy benefit, because if it's just a terminology of universal credit, then there could be people that just drop out. So is it the intention to make sure that these people are caught in that net as well?
The only frame of reference here to universal credit has been Norfolk County Council coming up with a way of weighting how they allocate money to districts. It's got no bearing or relevance to the fact that this money is for people who are in hardship, whether they be single individuals or in families. So I don't want us to go down a rabbit hole necessarily. The two things don't really equate. The point made though is quite right. Is if the weighting has been based on universal credit and not the totality of benefits recipients, it may not be a fair weighting. So that's something I'll go back and check.
Thank you. And again, could you let us know that in an email? That'd be wonderful. Now, you're yeah. Okay, Dave.
Thank you
then
very much.
Lana, and then I think we'll try and wrap this up because we are being dropped behind now.
Thank you very much. So my point, I've actually got two, but the first one is about legacy benefits. My concern is that tax credits isn't necessarily done the same way as the legacy benefits are, because that's administered by HMRC rather than the DWP. So I would like just some reassurance that that communication is actually taking place, so that even those on tax credits are in the formula. But I'll leave that with you. But the question I actually had, 3.4. Am I right in saying that the way that the large paragraph is actually worded there actually means that there is a potential for this this benefit that we have here being used for historic rent arrears?
Yes, and before I answer, let me just categorise. This is not a benefit; it's a grant.
Very well.
I know it's a pedantic point, but they're different.
No, completely agree.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, it's my understanding. You know, the only exemptions are mortgage payments and debt advice as specified. So more or less anything else we need we need to offer in terms of supporting people with hardship is on the table. Which, as I said in my introduction, is actually really very welcome, because often these grants are given with such tight specificity. We're limited in how we apply. I think it's good we've got local discretion.
Okay, my follow up is, obviously this comes under the reactive part of the report here. When it comes to the reactive timescales, how quickly are we looking to move on that? Are we talking days, weeks, months?
We'd be talking in days. So to give you some reassurance, we have a number of other tools that we already have and use to deploy resources to people. So the an example would be the support payment we provide people who are having to isolate. We do. I'm looking at Debbie or finance colleagues, but we do payment runs on a twice weekly basis. So effectively, the benefits team will catch the next payment cycle. So we're talking at worst case 3 days.
On that particular note, I know somebody that did actually claim for that, and they actually had from the application to the money coming from Broadland was less than 36 hours. So that I know that has worked very, very well.
Excellent. So I did say, Lauren, and I was going to wrap it up because we're a bit. I mean, is it something that you think is critical? So
on the same point. What is the extent to which these people are going to have to provide evidence and so on? Is it going to be a very simple application?
Yes, it will. The emphasis will be very heavily on professional discretion.
Thank you, Dana, and then I'm going to wrap it up.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is around the fuel. So bearing in mind this money is able to pay for fuel and the prices are rising really quite steeply day by day, is there any back office thinking about bulk procurement of oil that can then be distributed or at least reserved, an option taken with one of the oil providers in the district? Or several. And the second one is there's a last part of this scheme which is sort of discretionary, which is around budgeting, etc., etc., etc. Could you please elaborate on what, again, the officer's thoughts are where this money could go? Again, I'm going to loop back to if there's anybody who feels that they could use that for training, will that be considered under that particular loose heading of discretionary payment?
My understanding is...
We have covered the point about training.
Oh, sorry.
We've well covered the point about training, and we need to move on. So I'd agree that you can answer, Laura, in terms of the first point, but we've covered the point about training.
Okay, as you wish, Chair. The team have been in negotiations or conversations with the 3 major oil providers that our residents will use. Don't ask me to tell you which ones they are, but there are 3 I know. I will ask the question of them in terms of bulk procurement, because I don't know the extent to which they've had those sorts of conversations. It's an excellent point, and if we can get more for our money by buying in bulk, absolutely we should explore that, shouldn't we? So thank you for the question.
Okie dokie. So I'm going to wrap up now, moving to the recommendation, and clearly this is a delegated. The delegation also includes the portfolio holder for political judgment on that as well. It's primarily around the heating situation. It's been well described. I fully support this, by the way, and I think we probably would have a unanimous vote around this. Should we take one? Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. We could have had a bet on that one, but never mind. Thank you very much, and thank you, Jamie, for taking us through that. Move on to strategic item 11, strategic performance and finance report for Q1 and Q2, page 36. Okay, thank you very much. And we have Maddie Bussons and Sinead. Welcome. No, there's only 2 of you. Welcome. Fire away, please.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. So I'll take you through a high-level overview of the performance and delivery plan update for quarters 1 and 2, and then I'll hand over to Maddie, who will cover off the finance update for the first half of the year. Just to say, within the appendices, we also have provided the strategic risk register, which is in a draft format, and we plan on updating that register and bringing that back through to ONS and Cabinet in quarters 4, and also bringing that through to Audit Committee for review. So in terms of the overall health of the council in the first half of the year for our performance indicators, we have 17 indicators that are currently green, which means they are on track and hitting the targets that we have set. We have 4 which are currently amber, which means they're not currently on track or slightly missing the year-end target we set in the delivery plan. We have 3 which are currently red, which means these are missing the targets that we have set currently. We then have 4 measures which are annual measures, which we report through to members in quarters 4. And we have 3 measures which are still being baselined, and that's really for us to understand the current performance levels and to help us set targets in the future. So just to touch upon a couple of areas of interest. So in terms of the green measures, one I wanted to pull out for you is the number of residents supported by our discretionary prevention services. So in the first half of the year, we've had over 1,360 residents supported, and this is well above where we have set our target for year end, which is 2,000 residents across both Broadland and South Norfolk areas. In Q1, we secured 5.7 million to support the delivery of the Broadland Innovation Centre, and we also had an additional 670,000 allocated to us in Q2 as Broadland's allocation of the Norfolk Business Rates Pool. A measure we've currently got amber at the moment is collection of our business rates. So previously we reported to members in Q4 that this measure was red, and we can now report this is amber, with collection rates being higher than this time last year, but we are still lower than the historical averages on this measure, and we're currently sitting at 51.88%. We still have some challenges, particularly for businesses who are having to pay business rates in full for the first time in 18 months, but we continue to put support in place working with the economic development team. And finally, just to touch upon 2 of our red measures this quarter, which is the percentage of planning decisions made within statutory timescales, and this is both for minors and householders. So we're currently sitting at 76% on both of these measures, and both of these are below our year-end targets that we set of 90%. So these 2 measures can really be explained by delays that we've experienced between April and August this year in terms of registering applications. And this is really due to a higher number of applications we've received between April and August. But the team are now putting additional resource and support in place to help with this. And then just finally to touch on our delivery plan. So within the appendices, there is a 6-month update of the delivery plan that we set back in April for 21-22. And this includes a status update on a range of the key projects and programmes and activities that we set in April of this year. So I'll pause there. We do have a number of directors and assistant directors in the room who can answer any questions on specific service areas.
Thank you. Questions? Clarity? Could I just, I'll just ask, on the recommendations, we've got 1A to agree proposals for the usage of this year's potential underspends. Is that being covered by Maddie? Yeah. So I'll park my one until then. Right. Okay. You, Sue?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question on page 42, 43. It's about the planning applications not getting seen in time or dealt with in time. What are the consequences of that? I'm afraid I don't have a lot to do with planning, so I just wonder what does this 15% lower than our target actually mean to our residents and their planning applications? Thank you.
Phil?
Thank you very much. In terms of the consequence, I mean, if we go back to basics, there was just what we saw was performance dip as we came out of COVID. And there was a surge of planning applications, which was unique in my experience. A lot of people had money in their back pocket that had effectively accumulated over that lockdown and were wanting to extend their properties or move. So there's a huge surge of applications. So it's created a blip in our figures. In reality, if there are any sanctions imposed by the government, then they're a poor performance over a 2-year period. So as we see a blip, that doesn't affect us. There's no sanction related to that. If there was poor performance over a 2-year period, then you can be what's called designated and effectively special measures, but we've never been close to that.
Thanks, Phil. And in relation to the impact on the applicants?
Yeah.
I do. You can.
I touched it.
Yeah, as you can see from the figures, the majority of applicants are still receiving their applications in time. Where we go over that time limit, and it's a government set time limit, then we are allowed to agree an extension of time. Again, we've tried to communicate predominantly with people's agents because we have a lot of contact with those agents on a regular basis. So we try to communicate to them. I'm afraid it is a case of, to a certain extent, hands up that with that blip, there has been a reduction in terms of the number of times that we've been able to get applications, decisions out in a timely manner. So in some cases, there has been an impact upon applicants. But as I say, we are seeing that as a blip for a relatively short period of time and are recovering that situation.
Sorry, Phil, to keep pressing, but then
That's
what
fine.
happens if there's been consequences to an applicant because of that delay? Do they get the opportunity to ask for some sort of compensation, or how does it affect us that they might have suffered?
Yeah, I mean, there's no compensation mechanism by default if you receive, again, the planning process, as you will well know, as you enter into the planning process, there are a number of uncertainties associated. Are you going to get planning permission? How long is that going to take? Are there going to be objections that then need renegotiations, which will extend the period? So there's no hard and fast, all those government targets, they remain as targets. There's no hard and fast timescale after which someone is able to claim compensation. Clearly, if we've acted in a negligent manner, if we've acted in a way that can generate a complaint or an ombudsman complaint, then there are very rare occasions where we may pay compensation, but they are the absolute exception rather than the rule.
And there hasn't been anything as a consequence of what's happened this year here at this council?
Not as a result of what I'm describing as that blip. There's been no compensation payments as a result of that.
Right, Caroline and then Lana.
Thanks, Chair. Phil, still going with planning. Am I correct in thinking it's 18 weeks from application to decision?
If only there was a simple answer to that. So if it's a relatively small scale development, so an extension or a house up to 10 houses, then it's 8 weeks for the application process. But again, that can be extended. So there isn't any direct sanction if you go to 9 weeks or 10 weeks. For larger scale applications, then if it's over 10 dwellings, for example, or a large commercial development, it's 13 weeks. Sorry, there's even another one. If it's an environmental assessment associated with it, 15 weeks. So it does vary on the nature of the application.
Okay, and have any applications actually gone over that time?
Yes, it's not uncommon, especially the large scale applications. So when you have a very large complex application, it is not unusual for it to go significantly over that 13-week period. But again, that's done in conjunction, in collaboration effectively with the applicant. After that period, outside of that 8 weeks, 13 weeks or 15 weeks, depending on the nature of the application, they do have a right to appeal on what is called non-determination of that application. I'm just trying to think. I can't necessarily remember the last time there was an appeal against non-determination in Broadland. Actually, there is one in the certain appeal at the moment in South Norfolk, but it's unusual because again, we are in communication with the applicant through that process, so they're aware of those timescales.
Okay, the other question I wanted to ask was about personnel. You said there was a rush of applications after COVID. I also understand there was quite a lot of people leaving the department and there were vacancies. Have they all been now filled, or are they going to be filled in the near future?
Yep, so there's a number of vacancies. What you generally see in times when the housing market is booming and the planning sector is booming, you see that the private sector can generally offer more higher wages. So you see a bit of a transfer to the private sector, and when things are slumping a bit, the public sector generally offers more higher wages. So you see a bit of a transfer back into the public sector. We're just in a period where across the country we are seeing people moving into the private sector. So yes, we were running with a number of vacancies. Those have been filled now. So there's been a number of interviews that have been going on over the last few months. Those vacancies have been filled. There's an ongoing discussion. We are facing some major growth proposals, and in preparation for that, we're looking at our resources again to say, do we need to be on the front foot and further consider the resources in that team?
Okay, so we can hope that planning's getting back to normal again now.
I would hope and expect, and if Helen was here, she's here if we need her in due course, but if Helen was here, she would be absolutely saying that we can see what I've described as a blip returning back to normal. Thank you.
Okey dokey. Right, I have Lana, Peter and then Grant.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is around measure 26, if I've got this right, the recycling rates. I know that there was a campaign along 3 collection runs. One of them was in Acle, I think one of them was in Elsham, and another place in Broadland. Has there been, and the question is twofold, have we got any results from what those information campaigns have yielded in terms of improvement? And secondly, has there been a change in policy in how recyclables are collected? Because for as long as I've lived in Broadland, additional recyclables sort of placed in cardboard boxes next to the bins have been collected, and that hasn't been the case on the last 2 recycling runs. So I just wondered if I'd blinked and we'd changed the policy around that. Thank you.
Joe.
I will need to get back to you in terms of the success of the information campaigns, but I'm happy to ask the team to come back to you directly, Lana, if that's okay with you. And there has been no change of policy, so I'll need to take that one away and look into it also.
Yes, Judy.
No, I don't think the results have been formulated yet. Thank you. I don't think the results have been analysed yet for your first question, Lana. And the other thing about cardboard boxes, I'd just like to remind people that we don't really want wet cardboard. So I'm not saying it was raining on that day when they weren't collected, but maybe. But I can feed that back.
Thank you.
Keep it. Okie dokie. Right, Peter and then Grant.
Going back to planning, so exactly what is the recovery plan, Phil, and how is it progressing and when will it be completed?
In terms of a explicit and specific recovery plan, there isn't one, because at this point in time, there isn't one that is needed. The issue was that there was a surge of applications. That surge is now, we've now come the other side of that surge of applications. And the other issue was the vacancies that have already been referred to, and those have been filled. Also supplemented, I should have mentioned earlier, by 2 graduate apprentices as well that have been brought in to supplement the team. So I am satisfied that the 2 issues that were causing that challenge have either been addressed or have naturally passed.
Right, Peter. Okie dokie. Grant.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at the top of page 40, paragraph 3.12. The following suggestions are therefore put forward for consideration. Is that a consideration that Cabinet is going to make a decision about? Because I see the first one is £500,000 to be set aside in a new accommodation reserve. Is that somehow linked to the recommendation that was put to SIAC, that additional resources be made available to the working group? I presume that it wasn't, because I presume that this report was prepared before the meeting last Friday. I'm also curious about an amount of £45,000 set aside to support various Queen's Jubilee celebrations. Yes. Where did that figure of 45,000 and not 5,000 come from? I know it's not a big amount, but yeah, just curious to know what sort of support, what sort of projects, what sort of ideas do you have in mind for giving that? What sort of criteria are you looking at for dishing out that money to? Is it to organisations? Is it to parishes? Is it to yeah? So those are just my thoughts on that paragraph 3.12. Thank you.
Debbie?
I'll take the first one, Chair, and then I'll hand over to Jamie for the second one about the Queen's Jubilee. In terms of the first one, there is already money that has been put aside in the current year's budget from the comp funding, the COVID funding, to take forward the work on the accommodation review in terms of due diligence or extra work that needs to be done. So each council had a sum of money that's available for that additional work. So that's separate to this money here. This, I think, was the thought was we might set aside this small amount into a new accommodation reserve. It's just a proposal at the moment. That is different to the money, as I say, that's already in the budget for us to carry out some further work that's coming through the committee meetings that were held on Friday from both councils. So this is just as I say, it is what it says on the tin, the start of, do we put some money aside? It's up to it will be for Cabinet to decide how they want to take that one forward. Is that sufficient, Councillor Nairden? Yeah.
Thank you, Debbie. And Jamie?
The second half of the question, Chair, from Councillor Nairden. So £45,000, I believe. So we've suggested putting aside an indicative budget to enable us to take forward a number of things. I'll come back to that. For the Queen's Jubilee next year, I would imagine it's 45 because it's 100k overall, and therefore 45-55 split. I wouldn't think there's any more behind it than that at this stage. It's an indicative budget because we're still working up proposals of what we might do. I'll not steal the thunder of a report which might be coming forward in due course to explain to members what that might look like, but it'll be a range of things on to support the national efforts, to work across the Norfolk area with Norfolk County Council and other agencies, but also to just do some stuff locally in Broadland and in South Norfolk separately. It's a really, really good opportunity to just augment and develop some of our excellent community work, to get people out socialising, street parties, the sort of stuff we've seen and done in the past. It has such a great impact in terms of that community well-being and enthusiasm. So I guess it's with that tone we'll be looking at it, but I think a report will be coming forward in due course with more detail.
Carolyn? Sue?
Thanks. The Queen's Jubilee celebrations, is that something, that money, that the parishes could apply for funding? Because I know Taven have an event planned and we do need some funding for it. So anything would help, please.
Still, the same answer, I'm afraid. We're working at proposals. Let me talk to the officers and we'll bring forward a report in due course. But absolutely, we'd want to and should be looking to work with our parish councils and whatever we do put in place for that celebration.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Sue. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at page 45, and there's an item which is progress towards delivery of the predicted £8.6 million savings. There's a split in the saving forecast, it says, of 45-55, and I'm not sure where that came from. I know we allocate the costs on a 45-55 split, but I'm not sure where our anticipated savings for Broadland have. What were they in the feasibility study? Where are we now? And what proportion of the anticipated savings are we going to achieve or predicted to achieve by year 5? I'm not very clear on what this paragraph actually means. Thanks.
What page are you talking about, sir? What page did you say?
45.
45. Okay. Yes, who wants to? Debbie?
I'll take that one, Chair. So in the feasibility study that both councils signed off in July 2018, it set out how that 8.6 estimated savings figure was calculated, and also this ratio, the 45-55. We did revisit it once upon a time about 18 months ago now, when we had a sort of a joint member working group on that, and it still remained the same, the 45-55. So costs and savings are split in the same way. Based on that, and that was looking at the levels of spend. There was a various number of calculations that were carried out at the time, looking at revenue budgets and the proportion that both councils have. Any alteration to that could impact on your council tax. So hence why we do look at it periodically, but at the moment that's been retained at 45-55. So that's it. The 8.6 was a figure that was for both councils. It wasn't broken down at the time into between the two councils, and that's why we still measure it at that high level, because it wasn't broken down. So that's why it's measured at that, because that's how it was set.
Thank you. So we're 3 years in, and what proportion have we saved, or what percentage have we saved, and where are we anticipating we'll be after year 5 or at year 5?
So at year 5, we're potentially going to be the 8.294. So that is our current forecast in terms of where we think we're going to be at the end of the 5 years. And then there is a chart further down. I just need to find
Page
it.
56.
Thank
Debbie.
you so much,
Page
Chair.
56.
Thank you. There, that shows you where we are against that, and it's broken down by year, so you can see on there on page 56 where we currently are.
And if I may, can I pick this up now, because I've been waiting on this. So page 56. Yeah, the savings on the feasibility report, and as you remember, Debbie, I was on the feasibility working group, and with Andrew Proctor to start off with. And there was a point to all of this, that we had a feasibility study, indicative figures of 8.6, not prescribed as you would have in a business case review. There was also, of course, a motion from myself, which went to the July the 18th Broadland Council meeting, where we said, well, now you've done a feasibility study, you should now be doing a business case review. Steve Fennell, who was the corporate officer at the time, agreed that that would take a year if we was to do it. We could do it. However, as you know, that wasn't agreed. So what we've got here is indicative savings. There's nothing specific about how you would do that in terms of a business case review, which would have flagged that up. And then you make choices as a council. Do you want to do this? Do you want to not do that? And hence we end up in our situations that we're ending up in, where it's not clear, and therefore we keep on moving forward in an evolutionary way. The term that was put on really clearly at the time to us was evolutionary, meaning that things will develop to produce these savings. So just being clear about this, there's no prescriptive, it shall happen in exactly that way. Moving back onto page 56, you've got, I just want to ask a question here. We've got transitional, this is the second paragraph down. The figure net of second paragraph, second sentence. The figure net of one officer team transitional costs is 7.029 million. One team transitional costs were charged to the relevant councils, 45, 55, I completely, absolutely supported that at the time. Sorry? What?
It wasn't 45, 55, Chair.
What, the transitional
It was
costs?
each council paid their own costs. If you recall, we had some senior staff at each council leave. Each council paid their own costs, so that wasn't 45, 55, that was paid by each council.
Yeah, so I think the paragraph actually is very confusing. This is the point. When you come back then to the graph here, we've got one team transition costs, 1.265, 2019-20, 1265, and it's identical for each year. 19-20, moving forward 23-24. So that's a joint transitional cost, is it?
What that graph is showing, that is a cumulative figure. So we spent 1.265 in 1920. That's why the figure doesn't change. That's continued to show because we're showing how those savings are building up. And that is the total cost from both councils is the 1.265.
So right, okay. So just trying to clarify this box here. Are you saying that it's predicted from 2019 to 2024, the transitional costs are 1.265 only?
Yes, in total.
Okay, and those transitional costs, let's just clarify what they are. Are they purely to do with staff that left?
They were purely to do with staff that left at that senior management level.
Fine, okay. Now, where is the other transitional costs in terms of doing things different in terms of collaboration that have cost the councils money?
So there was a small sum of money that was put aside, and that is shown on there as transitional cost just above the first bold sum. It's got -69. So there was a sum put aside in the first year to do some of the transitional costs when we had consultants in and various things were done like that. When they Sinead, you were part of that piece of work.
Okay, so as we move forward, there are things that are happening that have got a cost to them. For instance, when this is what I'm just trying to tease out here, when the planning department moved down to South Norfolk, we've got an operating system, Phil, which is different from South Norfolk's operating system. We then moved down there, and then there was a change geographically about how those planning officers are working, now crossing over borders and all over the place. So then that drives you or the council coming up with one system. There has to be a cost to that.
So business cases are coming forward, like the finance business case was the first one, and that absolutely, so those business cases are shown that overall, I understand, Chair, what you're saying, sometimes you have to spend to save up front, but that those business cases are coming forward and demonstrating that over a period of time, there is a net saving, and it's only the net saving that we're then taking into account, so we're not double counting. So I think, Chair, I might be heading off in the wrong direction, but I think that's what you're saying, isn't there?
You're absolutely right. So what I'm saying is what we're not seeing, and I think we need to as a council, I'm going to let you in, Peter, I've got you, is that we actually could do with what these transitional costs over and above the labour transitional costs, what they are each time a move is made, because they were not specified. It was never specified, for instance, that we'd end up moving planning, for instance, just using an example, from here down to South North, and there'd be a transitional cost. Never specified. There's no business plan up front for that. So I think we could really do that information.
I think, Chair, it's only the business systems, that the IT systems, because there was no cost in terms of people working in a different location. When we renegotiated the terms and conditions, it said either office could be the base. So it's purely the IT systems, and they're coming through on an individual basis with each business case for those systems, so members can see what the net cost of us moving to any like the finance system one, actually over a period of time that pays back, and we end up saving money as both councils, and it's only the net saving that we're then taking into account here.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, can we please come back to us in paper with what the actual costs are?
At the moment, I think it's only so far as the website, and that's had a net saving of 15,000 that we've taken into account, and the finance system that we're currently implementing. So we haven't had many other joint systems coming through at this point in time.
But what we have spent transitioning so far, it'd be good if we could see what those are. We know you're saying net off, but it'd be good to see what those are. It's for clarity, because I found this whole thing a bit confusing, this grid and the paragraph around it, actually, to be honest with you. So, Peter, I'm going to let you in now.
Chairman, I find that I'm violently agreeing with you, which is very disturbing indeed. What worries me is actually these savings are predicted savings. Nowhere have I ever seen actual savings, and I would like to see a report come to this committee and indeed to council to identify exactly what savings have been achieved, when, where and how. And for the record, Phil, this does not include accommodation costs, which were considered quite separately, as I understand it, in the feasibility study.
I can guarantee they don't include the accommodation costs. The figures for the years to date that have already gone are the actuals. So they're not so 2019, 20, 2021 are actuals, 21, 22, obviously we're partway through. So that's an estimate for the end of to the end of the year. So those figures, 127.81 are actuals that have already been achieved to date. These are revenue savings. So savings for our revenue budgets, and in our medium-term financial plans for both councils, it incorporates us achieving the future savings that are identified in here. They're already taken into account, but accommodation is not part of these ones here.
Can we therefore, if they are actual savings, have a list of how those savings have been achieved? So I just like to understand exactly what those savings were, when they were achieved and how they were achieved. If that's possible, please.
We do have those, Chair. We can bring that forward.
And transitional costs itemised. That's what we actually need to get some overview on.
Just, Chair, just in terms of the senior management costs, we can only provide you with what was in the accounts. I can't go any more detail into that due to the non-disclosure agreement.
No, I totally agree. I think we're talking cross purposes. I've already established, I thought, and tell me if members hadn't heard what I've said, but I thought it was pretty clear. But what it was, we know that there was transitional costs. We've just established that it's 1.265 for a bit of scrutiny here. That's transitional labour, so to speak, staff. But there are other transitional costs that we're asking for in terms of that, as there's been a consequence of joint working, bringing people together, whatever, And it's to do with hardware, it's to do with systems, it's to do with perhaps moving from one office to the other constantly. What are these transitional costs? And we want that, and we need, as Peter said, what the savings are. Now, can we have those, please? Do we have to have a scrutiny committee, put it on our work programme to actually drive at this?
Chairman, I don't think that's necessary.
Okay.
Debbie's absolutely saying she can provide you with that information. I'm just making sure that the committee are absolutely clear in terms of those transitional costs you've talked about. Absolutely correctly, we've got the labour aspect.
Yeah.
We've got the 69,000, which was transitional costs at the time, which again we can cover, but that was the use of consultants, etc., in setting up the feasibility study. Many of the transitional costs that you are talking about will come through with those business cases. So as Debbie's explained, some of those have come through and we absolutely have those. Some of the other business cases are still being worked on. So I'm just managing the committee's expectations in terms of what you will receive. But absolutely, Debbie has confirmed that she can provide that.
And it's what's already happened we're talking about. Absolutely, Emma. It can only be on what's already happened, obviously. Right, okie dokie. Yeah, Peter. Right. We've violently agreed. I think we've all violently agreed there. I think. Yes, we've violently agreed. Right. Okay. So unless there's nothing else on this, what I'm going to suggest is before we move to the second report, if you look at the time, it's 20 to 12. We started at 10. So I'm going to suggest that we take a good 10-minute break. I mean, I'm picking this up for comfort break and come back in 10 minutes, and then we'll kick straight into your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the finance revenue overview for Q2, we are currently estimating to finish the financial year with a favourable variance against budget of 916,000. That is made up across the directorates as following. So within resources, we're looking at 199,000. That's page 38. 38 on my report. Is it 38?
Finance revenue dashboard 3.2.
Yeah.
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 38. Far away, mate.
Thank you. So, yeah, Resources Directorate is forecasting favourable variance against budget of 199,000, and that is primarily made up from some savings that we're forecasting from the corporate contingency budget, as well as the catering service, which has ceased. And also within IT, we've got a few posts in there which are being supported through the COVID spend through the infrastructure work. Within Place Directorate, we're forecasting a favourable variance against budget of 162,000. Again, the reasons primarily there are we've recently changed a contractor within the street lighting maintenance. We've got some increased land charges income from the extension from March through to June of the policy on that, and a favourable variance against budget for the vacancies that we were showing within the planning. Within people and communities, we are forecasting to achieve a favourable variance against budget of 528,000. Most of those are within the waste services. So we have some waste procurement fees from not fully utilising the budget, and the carry forwards from the improvements of the Frettenham depot. We've also got some recurring savings from the delivery of the clinical waste service, which has been procured through the county's service provider, and some increased income through the bulky waste. Within capital, we are currently spent actual against budget of 3.669, and we are forecasting an estimated outturn of 14.7 on the current capital programme. On the appendices, I just wanted to bring to your attention that there is a slight error on the COVID support. We have actually duplicated the Chief of Staff on that one, so I need to amend that one and send that one out. And I'll pause there for any questions.
Thank you.
Sorry, just wondered what page the amendment needed to go on to.
So that's page 47.
Okay, so I'll kick off then. Right, so coming back onto the point that was raised earlier on, can't remember which other councillor mentioned now, but I think I did as well. 1A, to agree proposed for usage of this year's potential underspend. Could you just elaborate on that and point us to which page?
So whereabouts was that,
One,
Chair?
page
46.
Page 46.
46. Recommendation.
Yeah, recommendation 1A, to agree proposal for the use of this year's potential underspend.
Those underspends are shown at page 40, Chairman.
40.
3.1%.
Oh, that is referencing the 3.12, I believe. Yes, it is. Yeah, Chair. It's referencing the 3.12 table that we discussed earlier.
Right.
On page 40, which is the 500,000 for the accommodation reserve, the 38k for Insight, and the 45k for the Queen's Jubilee.
And is that the total underspend? Was this 383? Yeah, it's 900,000, isn't it?
It's 916,000 is the predicted saving
So the
there
rest
in
of the
total, Chair.
916, what would be happening to that?
Well, at the moment, there is no firm proposals for those, Chair. At the end of the year, if there is a saving, that would go into your general fund reserve.
Okay. We got there. Right, anyone else? Yep. Grant?
Sorry, Chairman, thanks. My apologies then for having got it out of sync. However, the fact that we discussed that item, that's at this stage, those savings are indicative. Is that correct? In which case, we're agreeing that that is what it is going to be. So by saying that we agree to the proposals for the usage of that, are we saying then that if we do make that amount, that we will then do it as has been suggested in November, but we will only know in April, May, June, July, maybe next year, whether we have achieved that. So we will possibly have potentially allocated that amount of money without knowing exactly. So it could be significantly double that, or it could be significantly half of that. So we're agreeing to a proposal that should we make that it would be that amount. Is that correct? Is my understanding of what?
Debbie, this is a predicted underspend due to COVID money, I believe. Is that correct or not?
So there's a number of elements, Chair, that make up that. At the moment, we are already, as you can see on the table on page 38, actuals to date. We have a saving there anyway of over a million. We're thinking that by predicting at the year end, that will have come down a little bit to the 916. So I think this committee can take comfort from the fact that there will be some savings. Rather than wait to the year end, we're proposing that we utilise some of those. As you can see, one of those is a reserve, but the other ones are so that we can utilise them then. Yes, some of that saving has come about for a number of things, which Maddie has just described. So some use of the COVID money. So we haven't had to use our own funds there. We've had additional income coming in as well, and also some savings that are absolutely there. So we have absolutely made some savings this year, and so we don't want to wait to the year end. But you know, at the moment, as you can see, we're proposing £583,000. What we could do, plans for that. There is still some there, so you've got that bit of leeway anyway in terms of what the year end turns out to be, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So we had a workshop a couple of weeks ago, and we were asked about the budget and what we thought as councillors we might spend an underspend of about £1 million on. There were lots of suggestions, and I'm not seeing those suggestions in this table, and I'm just concerned, where is that? Where is the output from that meeting gone? Where is it now?
You mean the pre-budget questioning?
We had our ONS, and then we had an all-member online discussion where we were asked exactly that question. What do we do with approximately £1 million underspent for this year? And there were lots of suggestions come forward. I'd like to know where we are in the process of considering those suggestions. For example, there was a suggestion of defibrillators being installed across the district, etc., etc. There are lots of good suggestions made by councillors, but I haven't I can't see that reflected in this table. I'm confused.
Right, Emma. Oh, Debbie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And very good point raised there, Councillor Catchpole. Yes, what's happened is all those suggestions and the ideas that came through from that session have been collated, and we're sharing those with the portfolio holders. So obviously, we aren't predicting here to spend all of, or proposing that all of that money is utilised at the moment, the predicted savings at the end of the year. So there is funds there. And as I say, those ideas are being shared with portfolio holders for them to consider what they would like to then bring forward as well. So there will be some additional ones coming forward.
Like possibly putting the members' grant scheme up, which would be excellent. Dave?
Thank you very much.
To match South Norfolk.
I'm just curious. Obviously, the proposal there for £500,000 to go into a new accommodation reserve. What's that envisioned to actually do?
That was if we were to progress with looking at a potential new office. So at the moment, that money wouldn't be spent until obviously things develop further.
So as a follow-up, what is the necessity for that £500,000 to be allocated to that reserve and not into general reserves?
Just to start to prepare and earmark a funds set aside. It could just go into general reserves and be taken at a later date.
Right, so we're being asked to make this decision now with a great big question mark on the actual project. It's obviously not moving forward at this point in time, or moving forward, but obviously not necessarily with all the detail. But we are still waiting for information to go to policy, to the portfolio holders, for what was actually being suggested by councillors to actually spend the money on in this financial year. So I don't see the merits of squaring away £500,000 now if it's potentially could be spent on projects that are going to benefit our communities. So I just like to see where that logic actually is, because I don't see it.
I just think it was starting to seed fund that potential money that might be required. But there are other ways of funding that project, and as you say, that work is still ongoing around there. It will be, for Cabinet, obviously, to look at. In terms of writing the report, obviously, we had subsequently, I think this report had already been drafted to some extent before we had the meeting. Just what was it, a week or so ago with councillors, but we have got that list, and as I say, that list of ideas that came forward that evening will be shared with portfolio holders.
Right.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify, I am the Vice Chairman of the SIAC meeting. And one of the things that we did add to the recommendation number 3 that was agreed at the committee meeting was that we would place at the disposal of the working group additional resources, which is both financial resources as well as officer and potentially outsourced resources, which may be required for the further work that needs to be done to determine how we are going to go forward with accommodation. So I just thought I'd mention that to Councillor King, that yes, there is the need for the financial resources to be made available for the working group, but 500,000 is an indicative amount. As I mentioned earlier, it is possible that we may need less, we may need more. However, once you put money in to a reserve, you can take money out of a reserve. So it could be in a year's time or a year and a half's time that we take money out because we need to have a look at where our reserves are and what we actually need going forward. So I just thought I'd hopefully give a little bit of clarity to Councillor King on the use of that money, which has been put aside or was being proposed to be put aside even before we had the Service Improvement and Efficiency Committee meeting last Friday. Thank you.
Dave, and I think if there's no more off that, we'll try to wrap this up. We're
Thank you.
falling behind a bit.
No, I agree that the working group and obviously what needs to be done needs to be funded from somewhere. I'm just a bit apprehensive about putting £500,000 in an accommodation reserve, which could be better spent on other things. I'm not saying that money, because if there's £916,000 sitting in there, that's more than enough going to fund the next part of the project. But locking £500,000 away when there's other projects that we could potentially do this year, which, as it's already been indicated by the officers, there is a list that is being worked through. I think it's too early. I'm not saying don't do it, but unless we have all the information, why should we put £500,000 away with unanswered questions and a report that has not yet gone to the portfolio holders to even discuss or be actually looked at a second time by councillors? I totally agree that when we actually know, when we get to April, May, June, July, how much money is actually going to be sitting there, and then we can allocate it to where it could potentially be of most use. But I fail to see of how squirring away £500,000 at this point is actually going to benefit our residents, when that £500,000 could potentially go on fulfilling some of the objectives that councillors have actually suggested to the council and to the officers. So I don't see the logic of doing it at this stage.
Okay. I think someone else could wrap this up and come back onto that point. So basically, you've got here recommendations 1A, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3 are really around what is. 1 is actually around to agree proposals for the usage of this year's potential underspend, which is actually a positive kind of proposal in there. It's a little bit different from the others, actually. So perhaps in line with comments been made around that, because I'm trying to summarise it, I haven't got anything to the contrary, we could have a line in there under 1A that Scrutiny view that it is premature to agree these proposals as set out on page 40, taking into account the meeting that occurred or workshop that occurred, whatever the date was, I can't remember now, last week, whenever it was, and suggestions that was being put forward there, plus also in terms of other matters that this may further to other matters that may need to be considered by the Cabinet in relation to working group spending or accommodation or other matters. Did you sort of get that?
I did, yes.
Yes. So you can just read that out, James.
The Review and Scrutiny Committee view this as
premature.
This is premature to agree proposals in view of the 12th of November SIG meeting and the recommendations that they've got.
No. But we're saying two things in here. The workshop. When was the date for this?
Can I assist, Chairman?
Yeah.
So the workshop was a week ago last Monday.
What's the date?
Which was the, bear with, hold on.
Monday the 1st.
No, it was the 3rd. Do we have on the 3rd? Yeah, the Board of Membership Workshop and Budget was on the 3rd of November.
3rd November, Wednesday,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
So could I assist, Chair?
Yes.
I think what you're saying in terms of 1A is, as Overview and Scrutiny, do you believe it's premature to allocate the underspend as we stand, as you wish officers to take account of the outcomes from the member workshop held on the 3rd of November and the outcomes from the recent review of the accommodation?
Yes, exactly.
Sounds good.
Yeah. We've got the word premature in there. I like that word, premature. Yeah.
With the decisions from that meeting.
Not decisions, though. Let's be
Not
clear.
decisions, but
Yeah, yeah,
recommendations
yeah,
from
yeah.
that meeting, which I wasn't able to attend. Was the food waste rollout mentioned? To use some of that underspend to put to use for that?
Oh,
I can't recall, but I do know that officers are pulling together everything that was put forward in that and looking at all of the options, but I can't remember off the top of my head, Councillor. Apologies.
yeah. I mean, the food waste, and Judy's still here, but I mean, we had quite a lot of clarity on this, Judy, didn't we, through ONS, and then it came back through to Cabinet. You read out a further statement to Cabinet on that night, quite a long one, actually, about the panel's decision as well, that when you get to it, the intention is to do that. There is savings that's going to be made under the waste contract, and that those savings could be used to help the rollout. Is that correct, Judy?
Yes, that is correct, and there's a paper coming forward, which will come forward to Cabinet about this with the full facts in.
Yeah.
Yeah, the stumbling block, may I remind people, was the amount of government funding. We looked for clarity, but
burden relief. Burden relief, right.
Sorry, Chair, could I just make it clear that these savings of 916,000 we're predicting is a one-off opportunity, so we couldn't use it to fund something ongoingly because we've already taken out in future years budget planning if those do reoccur. So, for instance, the street lighting contract has resulted in a saving, we've already stripped that out in planning next year's budget. So it is a one-off lump sum that members have got to play with, rather than being able to fund something as a long-term aspect, if that's okay.
Yeah, and the whole point about this is some savings within the waste contract, and therefore, if those savings wasn't enough, and if it was to be rolled out, that might cost more than that, which then becomes a budget issue rather than a one-off saving. So that needs to be left where it is, if you see what I mean. Right. Glad we're all sort of on awake today. I don't know how I am, but anyway. Okay, so we've agreed. Have we agreed that yet, James? We haven't, have we? Because you asked. Yeah, right. Okay. Right. So I'm going to put that to the vote. All in favour of what James read out? All agree?
2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 11, 12. Any one abstention or?
One against. One against. Okie dokie. Fine. Thank you very much. Right. So thanks very much for your contributions and support today. We'll move on to next item. Let's find the agenda again. Update on member IT, and that's over to you, Emma, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. The gift that just does keep on giving.
Page 176.
Page 176, Ken. But I will take you straight over to page 177. So keep scrolling and I'll wait for you to get there. Okay, so the current position with member IT is, if you recall, and Phil's just spilled his coffee everywhere. You just leave it there, Phil. Me and David are fine. It's okay. So you've had your iPads now for a number of times, a number of years now, but you've now got the new software, the new email, and the new Office 365 suite. Over August and September, surveys were sent out to all members asking a variety of questions in terms of what do you like and what works, what don't you like, what doesn't work. What do you use the equipment for? What would your ideal solution be? And if there's anything else. I think disappointingly, or you could say encouragingly, depending on which lens you look through, the response rate was very low. I think from Broadland members, we only had 11 responses. Nonetheless, they were responses. I'm hopeful that means that people are happier. So I'm trying to be positive, Chair, in that regard. Nothing there.
Ever the optimist.
Ever the optimist. I try. So everything that's in there, we are working through. Some members have asked for some specific training again, which we're dealing with. And the proposed action is, as we've noted previously, that we will commence a trial early spring 2022 to look at the best options that could be adopted from the May 2023 elections. You'll recall your iPads have a life cycle of 4 years. So in advance of that, we will look at different options of how we can best support you as members with the IT equipment, and we'll be looking for people and members to do some trials for us on various different options so we can work out which will be the best option for us, and then we can buy that ahead of the May 23 elections. I wasn't going to say anything other than that, Chair.
Okie dokie. Tony?
Yeah, Emma, if you're looking here for anybody who can bog up something very quickly, I'm your man.
Noted, Tony. What an offer.
Anyone else? No? Okie doke. So I'll move to recommendation. Excuse me. To accept the report on the current IT provision for members and note the plans for the trial period. Yes. Okie dokie. And I'd just like to say, as usual, the iPad drives me nuts, but I couldn't not get that in, Emma. Sorry about that.
I'd be disappointed if you didn't, Chair.
Yeah, I know you would. So all those agree with that recommendation? Yes. Looks unanimous. Yes.
4. Yeah, it looks to be unanimous, Chairman.
Great. Wonderful. Thanks, Emma. Grant?
Can I just ask a quick question? What's happening with regards to the payroll software for members?
It's not strictly on this, but it is a sore subject, so I guess just a quick.
So I have emailed around all members to say that between now and the move over to the new system, email all expenses claims into Claire White. She will process all of those for you. I think for everybody involved, including my team and yourselves, that will make life a lot easier. I'm happy to send that email around again, Chair, if that would help. And we are then looking for the Oracle move to happen in line with the financial year. And then we will set training up for all members on the new system, which I've looked at and believe me is a lot more straightforward than what we're struggling with at the moment. So hopefully that will make improvements in the longer term as well.
If we need a P60, do we contact Claire?
Any queries, contact Claire and we can sort that all for you. Yeah.
Okie doke. Yep. Okay, move on to next item. Item 14, pay forward plan, page 181. Am I there?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, 181.
Yep, 181.
13. That's just for noting, Chairman, really.
Is there anything that's been added to the forward plan other than the last time it was presented?
I think that is as accurate as it is as of today. I can't think of any changes off the top of my head, but that doesn't mean that there haven't been any. But I think I'm just thinking Jamie's reports that we've got coming through on waste. We got timelines for those, Jamie. I can't remember what they are.
Chairman, I believe they're on the full plan now. They weren't at the last cabinet.
Yeah, you're correct.
So
they are.
the food waste maybe should be on the full plan for December.
Yeah, it is. Apologies. Yeah.
And also on, or I haven't got page number, I guess it would be 182. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4th box down. Future office accommodation, cabinet to recommend 23rd November, council 9th December. That clearly.
Well, that's a live update, Chair. So absolutely, that will need to be updated.
Changes, yeah. Okie dokie. Right. So it's really to note that, yeah. Brilliant. Okie doke. Right. Exclusion. Move to exclusion, James.
Exclusion, yeah.
Agenda item number 15, exclusion of the press and public. I move that the press and public be excluded from the meeting, the remaining items of business, because otherwise information which is exempt information by virtue of para 3 of part 1 schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006 would be disclosed to them. I so move. Agreed. Let me know when the